The idea of globalization was that rich countries would move further up the value chain while the poor countries made the simpler things.
This is only the beginning.
Humanity is facing two existential crises: the specter of global conflict and the relentless advance of climate change. These challenges are intertwined, and they demand urgent solutions and action. Not tomorrow, not next year, but now. This is not just a story of crisis. It's a call to action, a call for a global reset. Conflict and climate change are the defining threats to human survival. Conflict, fueled by our belief in scarcity, creates a need to compete over what we regard as diminishing resources. Social conflicts, fierce political contestations, and geopolitical tensions are just some of the results of this belief. On the other hand, extreme weather with heavy rains, earthquakes, landslides threaten the various systems that sustain us, including an ecological collapse. Conflict and climate change are interconnected, each made worse by the other. But there is hope. If we act now, we can change course. The question is, will we rise to the challenge, or will we continue down the same path of division and destruction? For 81 years, ever since the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944, the US dollar has enjoyed a coveted position as a world reserve currency. The US has enjoyed unmatched economic power by which it built the most powerful military in the world, allowing it more geopolitical leverage than any country. The power of the US dollar is now waning, threatened by an increased demand for alternative payment systems after the US weaponized the dollar against its geopolitical rivals. The collapse of the dollar stands to erode the enormous power that the US has enjoyed for a long time. What we now see happening in the US is a way to prepare the nation for an imminent collapse, while at the same time slowing it down by imposing trade tariffs on the whole world as a way to renegotiate better trade deals. The question now is, what happens if the tariff works? Does the world go back to being colonized by the powerful? What happens if it doesn't? Does the world go to war as another attempt by the powerful to assert their power? Does the US continue to insist on being a sole superpower? Or does the world work to create a global balance of power in which everyone could thrive? However, everything that we see happening in the US right now needs to be understood in the light of a superpower in decline and trying to defend its privileged position. In the process, the truth that diplomacy has for a long time kept wrapped up and tucked away from view is now rearing its head. That truth is that the people of the world are living in a false sense of equality, which on the surface appears like we all embrace the equality of our humanity, while in fact, silently perpetuating mutually exclusive agendas. As it stands, this could well be the end of globalization as we know it, simply because of the refusal by some states to be bound by the very common rules that make us a global community. Or with the advent of artificial intelligence, where there is so much artificial reality created that there is no way to establish the identity of another person or the reality of anything we see online. It's up to the rest of the world to decide on what all this means in relation to the equality of people, sovereignty of states, and survival of the human race. Whether it's his blunt rhetoric, his unconventional policies, or his willingness to upend the status quo, Donald Trump is resetting the United States, and all who depend on the United States will need to reevaluate and readjust, if not reset themselves. And why is a reset necessary? The reason is simple. Not only the US, but the whole world through, our current way of life is no longer sustainable. World governance institutions that do not recognize the equality of the people of the world, the dysfunction of democracy itself, self-serving leadership that disregards the will of the people, and economics that are based on destroying the very earth that we depend on. A better and more sustainable way has to be found, and that way would require all the people of the world to define it. Now, let me spend some time outlining to you how the current world system came to be so damaged that we now need to reset it. Since the dawn of humanity, we've sought to answer the most fundamental questions regarding our existence. Who are we and why are we here? We sought answers with the hope that, should we find them, we'd find a more harmonious way of living with each other in the world. So, our quest to find answers marked the beginning of humanity's search for knowledge, a quest which ultimately gave us philosophy, religion, science, technology, and a civilization which in many ways has elevated our way of life. Yes, we ultimately got the answers to our questions. But unfortunately, they got too clouded in the drama of commerce, competition, and conflict, civilization as we know it. We are all one with each other and with the world in which we live. The purpose for life is to find harmony with all that we think is not us. And that is how we overcome the situational differences that we perceive in each other. Those are the answers we've been looking for all along. However, somewhere along the way, we lost sight of the original intention of using these answers for the benefit of all humanity. When we created money, information and knowledge became commodities that could be bought and used for competitive advantage, creating a state where knowledge could be accessed by only those who could afford it. This served only to deepen inequality among people. It was in the height of dominance and inequality that we started to organize society towards common social goals. And we created democracy as a way to forge social consensus. Social cohesion was reached by way of creating laws, rules, and norms that became a social contract. The aim was to bind society together and regulate how people yield to each other over the resources that our shared world provides. We then drew borders and created a system of ownership, which allowed others to permanently own parts of the world. It was because of the system of ownership that capitalism was born. Over time, the global contract that was created as a means to share our world and ensure survival for all slowly got hijacked by capitalism and the narrow interests of those who had more resources, who used their possessions, especially money, to deepen inequality, thereby defeating the intended purpose of the social contract. However, nowhere else do we find a system created on the basis of inequality and responsible for deepening it than with the system of democracy as practiced today. Democracy is meant to reflect the will of the people, but too often it serves the interests of the powerful. Many nations are governed by the financial and personal interests of those at the top and not the will of the people who vote them in. Essentially, getting majorities of people to vote has become only a way to legitimize the actions of the leaders who would then use this power to serve their personal interest. It is only when you look deeper into the numbers involved in how our democracies are formed that we realize that the majority of world governments are essentially illegitimate. Because contrary to democratic rule, they are in fact voted in by minorities and not majorities. According to usafacts.org, a website created to make information about the US government accessible to the public. As of September 2024, there were 186.5 million registered voters in the US. In the elections of the same year, Donald Trump received 77.3 million votes. By the current election standards, this is a major political victory. However, a closer look at the numbers reveals that he has won by only 41% of the registered voters and only 23% of the total population of the US. Is this truly a majority? Take the same model of democracy applied to every democratic country in the world where elections are held, and you begin to realize that no government could rightfully claim to have been voted in by the majority of the people it governs. In some cases, not even half, and in worst cases, not even a quarter. Now, how different is that to a country ruled by a dictator where elections are not even held at all? Is that still democracy? Globally, majorities are myths. France's 2022 presidential elections were won with 38% of eligible voters. Germany's 2025 elections by just 28%. Millions of people in the world are forced to abide by decisions and choices they never endorsed. Of course, we have all the fractured societies of the world and the collapsing multilateral system to show for that. If democracy is founded on a principle of majority rule, can it truly be said to function when the fate of a whole nation is determined by less than a quarter of its people? If democracy is a government of the people by the people, why do so few decide? It is clear that the world needs to find ways to establish real majorities for true social consensus to exist. We need to elect leaders who can govern for the greater good, not just for their donors, their ideologies, or political careers, while at the same time setting us against each other like left versus right, race versus race, us versus them, divide, conquer, repeat. Global cohesion and cooperation can only be sustained by a global pact that involves all the people of the world participating to determine their own destiny. To uphold a global social contract in a fair way that recognizes the equality of all the people it binds is justice. At its root, the concept of justice should be based on the equality of the people, their entitlement to be provided for by the resources of the world in which they are born, and to which no one could truly lay any exclusive claim. In the absence of equality, justice cannot prevail, and the social contract collapses, creating a suitable climate for tyranny. The current unipolar order is crumbling. That gives the people of the world an opportunity to build a new multipolar order. The old one was designed in a different era, shaped by colonial powers and built on systems of inequality. It excludes billions, prioritizes the powerful, and perpetuates cycles of scarcity, all while fermenting conflict among people. Just take a moment to think about this. The US is one powerful country with influence in every part of the world. However, in 2025, it is being perceived as a country with two agendas. One that could be regarded as the old agenda, that has for many years become the template for mainstream US politics, the economic management and foreign policy. Another, the Trump agenda, which for good or for worse, seems to be more of a reset of all that the world has come to know. Either way, the world is now a different place than any time before 2025. The problem with the two agendas is that they don't just oppose each other, they condemn each other. And with America's influence in the rest of the world, the question now becomes, which of these agendas does the world subscribe to? And whichever one we choose, what happens when the next US president comes in and decides to change it? Is this sustainable for the people of the world? Is it not time that the whole world paves a new way that is based on qualities that will not change regardless of who is in power in which country? It is time for the world to find agreement based on confronting the truth of our humanity, and from there, reconfigure our world governance structures to serve only this truth, which is our humanity makes us all equal and entitled to be provided for by the resources that this world gives freely to all who live in it. We need a new global contract for a new world order, one that reflects the diversity, the values, and needs of today's global population. A contract that prioritizes equality, inclusivity, and collective survival of the human species. Let us all reset our world order. To end conflict, restore human cooperation and world peace, humanity needs to answer two key questions as a matter of urgency. Firstly, by virtue of our humanity and need to depend on the world in which we are all born, do we all agree that all the people of the world are equal? And all the laws, institutions, and bureaucracies we create have to benefit all? It is only when we embrace the equality of our humanity that we could all cooperate to reconfigure global institutions that were created for inequality and make them serve all people, not just some. Secondly, can we all agree that factors that cause climate change are not all quantified enough for us to reliably consider human activity to be the major cause of climate change? With that, our focus needs to shift from seeking to control, but to adapt to new climate. Now, in closing, I want you to know that I am saying all this as a South African, a country of contrasts faced with challenges of balancing different priorities, reconciling a nation made of various ethnic and racial groups, all with disparate backgrounds, while at the same time coming to terms with the history of oppression by white people, and the need to now form a nation based on forgiveness, empowerment of the previously disadvantaged groups, and the need to define a new nation that works together towards addressing common human challenges of our times. Whether it is by the mistake of history or the laws of nature that the various people of the world find themselves in the same country and having to form a nation, is neither here nor there. What is important is whether we could all rise above our differences and define for ourselves a common future that we could all aspire for as a nation, and make for ourselves a new identity, not of Europeans, Africans, or Asians, but human beings with a common goal to survive in the same space that we all share. You see, all people harbor prejudices in some form, whether racial, xenophobic, sexist, homophobic, or based on other stereotypes that we construct. To simplify reality, we often project these biases onto broad groups of people, causing great harm based on isolated experiences. What we frequently overlook is that no group of people is monolithic. Even those we hold in highest regard as our people contain exceptions. Sometimes our closest ally may betray us, while a stranger might save our lives. Which means good people are not always where we expect good people to be, and bad people are not always where we expect bad people to be. These exceptions reveal to us a fundamental truth regarding our humanity, which is the qualities we condone or condemn in others exist also within us, which makes us the same as the people we think we are not. Ultimately, we are bound by our shared humanity and dependence on this planet. By embracing equality, fostering inclusivity, and prioritizing collective survival, We can create a world that works for all of us. The choice is ours. Will we continue down a path of division and destruction? Or will we seize this opportunity to reset, realign, and rebuild? Do you believe that our humanity makes us all the same and equal? Think about it. Our world can only be sustained by the equality of its people, working together to save themselves from the looming catastrophe. It's not too late to do something. Act now. Thank you.